Thank you for tuning in to meet us again. We are actually going to talk about something important today again. This is because we come across some kind of jumbled stories in the Quran, which is striking us. We are so surprised to see such kind of things, and it makes us to question the authenticity of the Quran to some extent as to who is actually the author and why would he present the stories that is so familiar to some of us, yet is so confusing in the Quranic presentation. And that is what we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at one of the chapters in chapter 18 of the Quran, verse 86, and other verses, just briefly. That verse talks about a Pharaoh who ordered or instructed a Haman and to go and build a tower. So striking, right? So striking. Pharaoh, we have the history of Pharaoh in Egypt, right? And Pharaoh has been, and it was a title, of a great emperor who, in the history of Egypt or Egyptians, till date, from the record we have so far, we do not have anyone who had ever served in Egypt, both in ancient Egypt and unto date, as or named as Haman. So, but we have this verse which instructs us on that, and we are so surprised. And that is why we are drawing your attention to look into. In the Bible, we have the correct account of this narrative, of this event. Pharaoh is actually an emperor or a king in Egypt who history has proven that to have existed, because the Bible also have that account and we have all the narrative. Now, according to the Quran, as in contrast to the Bible, is that Pharaoh instructed Haman, and that Haman went to build a tower for a supposed Pharaoh. Pharaoh, like I said, was in Egypt. Haman was in Persia, the current day Iran. And Haman and Pharaoh lived a different years of about 1,000 years gap. And we have a tower. A towers were not known both in Persia or in Egypt. Never the history of towers. Building towers in those nations, it never existed. But towers were known in Babylon and the current day Iraq, which is the then Babylon known. So we have a jumbled three event put together in one verse. And the Muslims want us to believe that this event, it was actually like that. It happened as the Quran presented it. These are people of different dispensation, different language, different generation, of about 1,000 years different each from each other. Because Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11, where the Tower of Babel was built by a people of which during that time God split the tongue and the language of mankind, according to the account we have. Of the rebel of mankind, human beings grew into rebel and they wanted to build a tower to reach into heaven. And God crumbled that project. So later on, we have a king in Persia under King Xerxes. which Haman served. Haman was an official in the palace of King Xerxes, or King Ahasuerus rather, through whom Haman wanted to be unkind and to be wicked to the Israelite, and which finally makes Esther to become a king, as we have in the book of Esther. The account is there, narrative. And we later have a Pharaoh here who was in Egypt completely. But the Quran jumbled the three story and make it just in one verse as this is what exactly happened, which is so much surprising, contradictory, unfounded. In fact, we can call it anachronism. That is mixing up different events with different personality into one. It's called anachronism. That is just one fumble story in the Quran, which makes us question the author of the Quran. Was he not aware of this historical event? Or can he prove with evidence if these personalities actually happened in the place he did claim to have happened? And if there was a Haman in Egypt, and if Egyptians were known for building towers, we wanted and we need such claims from historical evidence or archaeologist proof to know that those things happened. It never happened anywhere. That's just by the way. But it's just to prove that the Quran is actually questionable in terms of its authenticity and its origin. That is just one account. We have another account of Jesus' mother. The Quran claims that Jesus' mother, whom we know as Mary, that she was a sister of Moses and Aaron, the daughter of Amram, according to the Quran. It's completely another anachronism again, because we go through the biblical account of Moses and his sister Miriam. In fact, the name is not even Miriam. The names are even two different names. Miriam and Maryam are completely two different names in the Hebrew history and the Jewish history, and their meaning as well. That is just one. Secondly, they live almost 1,200 years apart. Far to 1,200 years, almost 1,200 years apart. So, but the Quran wants us to believe that the mother of Jesus, whom the Bible in the New Testament never tell us anything about her parent. Nobody knows the anything related to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Either her parent, her mother, her father, or her relatives is not mentioned in the Bible completely. We only have Matthew and Luke who try to give the account, the genealogy, as in the line through which she came to be and the line through which Joseph came to be. Try to connect it, but nobody can specifically, as in from the Bible, say that the mother of Mary, who is the mother of Jesus, was named this, or her mother or her father was like this. No, but the Quran fabricated that and liken or link Mary, because they think that since Miriam or Moses had a sister called Miriam, and therefore the Quran jumbled the story together. So we have a Mary, mother of Jesus, who is said to be a sister to Aaron and Moses. How ridiculous can that be from the Quran, supposed a sacred book, that is jumbling history, is just mistaking some persons to others, yet is considered to be sacred. That will simply mean that the author or the intelligent or the mind behind the Quran was not abreast with history. And that is all we can say about the reason behind that obnoxious kind of jumbled story. So, but saying these two events, it now did not surprise us when we see the mistaken or the misunderstood Trinity that the Quran did presented. Because at the end of the day, having have several examples of a jumbled stories, we even see an account of Alexander the Great also mixed up into this Quran, giving us completely conflicting historical event and story altogether. So we are not surprised, having gone through this, that we later see where the Quran did explain or talked about the Trinity as Father, Jesus, and Mary, that these are the three persons that the Christians worship. We are like, oh, that's another one again. This is another jumbled story. So the mind behind the Quran is so questionable to us that ordinarily, if we go through so many examples, we can now clearly see that the Quran is not conversant with history, is completely stumbles some stories, and it makes us surprised as to why should we take the Quran seriously. For instance, let me just take you in one chapter. Chapter 86, chapter 18 of the Quran, verse 86, it says, until when he reached the certain place of the sun, he found it setting in a murky spring, and he found near it a people. We said, O dwell, either punish them or treat them with kindness. This is scientific error. Until when he, a person, reach the certain place of the sun. Who can reach where the sun is? Who knows where the sun is and how it? Scientifically, we know the sun does not rotate. It is the earth that rotates within a certain number of hours, that turns around, and you see the sun set, the sun rise. It is not the sun that is, it is the other way around. But the Quran is telling us that when he reached the certain place of the sun, he found it setting in a muddy spring, murky spring of mud. Wow. Reconcile this as a Muslim. Just explain to us, how can you scientifically prove to us that the Quran was correct on this narrative? And you want us to believe that the Quran is not questionable with this kind of presentations, with this kind of IQ, with this kind of jumbled historical error? It is completely not connecting, and that is why we question the historical inaccuracy, the scientific errors, and so many other jumbled stories in the Quran that is so much striking to some of us, especially when we see some intelligent, meaningful, and well-meaningful Muslims, very good people, are still sticky and stick to these books and regard it as highly as they do. So we challenge any Muslim to come up with both evidence of history, scientific, and others. We can debate on those things and many more, on why we should question the authority or the authenticity of the Quran, because of so many things that the Quran did present, that they are not in any way reconcilable with human intelligence or with history or even with science. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. Until we meet again. Bye for now.